Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron, and I am here for you with some exciting Battlytics to kick off 2024. Just think, in 1,001 years, we will be right in the meat of the Succession Wars era. How exciting! Uh, so tonight, we're going to look beyond the Succession Wars. We're going to look at a mech from the ilClan era, from one of the recognition guides, I believe this one was in. Maybe not. But it is an ilClan era design. It is the Merlin C. So this is a clan refit of the Merlin, which originally debuted in like 3010, I believe, and it was debuted and heralded as one of the technological marvels of its day. It was actually the first new battle mech that was produced in something like 100 years. Fun facts you can find over at sarna.net, by the way. Excellent BattleTech resource. So anyway, this thing, it's actually more than a refit. It's like a whole clan rebuild. It counts as a clan tech base, and it has a battle value of 1870. So it's got a lot of good clan tech, good clan goodies, good clan weapons, all the things we love, including a standard fusion engine. So let's talk about the specs. Moves 4/6, jumps 4, has 18 double heat sinks. It's an astronomical amount of heat dissipation available. Standard gyro, standard cockpit, standard structure, but it's got fancy new ferro-lamellar armor. Pretty cool. I think this might be the first mech in Battlytics that we looked at with ferro-lam, and the way that armor works basically is this. So for every 5 points of damage, you basically take 4 points instead. It reduces the damage by 20%, essentially. So it's got 12 tons of that for a total of 168 pips, and that gives it 83.6% armor coverage. Coverage overall looks pretty decent. It's a little bit light on the legs, but overall pretty solid there. Let's talk about the armament, though. This is where it gets exciting. What I liked about the armament here is that it is very diverse. You can do a lot of different things with it, and it's still true to the original Merlin design, right? It's got a pair of medium lasers in each arm, but they're improved heavy medium lasers. What is an improved heavy medium laser, you ask? Great question. I'm glad that you did ask that. So, first of all, heavy lasers are basically more powerful lasers that are less accurate. So when you fire them, they have a +1 gunnery mod that is applied, so it's a little harder to hit with them. The improved heavy lasers eliminate that mod, so the accuracy returns to normal, but they blow up if you hit them. I don't know. That's not really a trade-off for me. I think I'd rather have the accuracy penalty, but whatever. So here we are. Improved heavy medium lasers that explode in each arm of the Merlin. Now, I will caveat this with, it only explodes for 5 points of damage. It's not significant. Backing those lasers up, we've got a heavy machine gun and a flamer. The heavy machine gun is like a machine gun that does more damage, but somehow doesn't have as much range. If you thought you could have less range than 3 hexes, you were right, you can. It only shoots out to 2 hexes. It has no long range at all. The flamer's a flamer. We love it. This is where it gets exciting. It's got a clan ERPPC, an absolute devastating weapon. It does tons of damage, has excellent range, can head cap a mech in a single shot. So that elevates this thing, in my opinion, significantly. And then it's got a little Streak LRM-5. It's sort of like the Snow Raven engineers wanted to show off a little bit. This thing's basically like a medium laser that hits out to 21 inches. It's okay. It's not, again, Streak LRMs are really scary when you get to the 15s and the 20s and you have that much damage slamming in at once. This thing, I mean, it's okay. It's pretty cool. It's a cool little gadget. All of the ammo is co-located in the left torso, and that's that. So, kind of back to the top, 1870 battle value. It's not insignificant, but it's not crazy high. It does seem to have a pretty nice array of weapons. It's got that ferro-lam armor. Could be a winner. I don't know. Stay tuned. Guys, Battlytics is going to crunch the numbers and let us know. Merlin C, it's coming right up. All right, so here we are at the offensive benchmarks. Kicking it off, the first thing I notice is you can't build up any heat. All right. This thing is so heat efficient, it's silly. So I looked at the numbers, I ran the math. So the heavy mediums, they build up 7 apiece. The ERPPC builds up 15. The Streak LRM builds up 2, and the Flamer builds up 3. So basically, you're at 34 points of heat on an Alpha Strike, 31 points if you're shooting everything except for the Flamer, right? And the machine gun. Let's assume you're at, normal ranges, not at point blank. 31 points of heat. You can dissipate 36. That means you can jump and no scope 360 Alpha Strike with all your useful weapons, and you still build up no heat. So pretty cool. Snow Raven very concerned about the environment, so made this thing very heat efficient, I guess. The red line damage, the optimized damage, the baseline damage, they're all identical. They're all the same. 219.2 points of damage, which is not too shabby, I might add. So let's take a look at the lethality. This is where I really want to dig in because, again, it's got a lot of big damage weapons, which excite me for a 60-ton mech. Lethality looks pretty good. It kills the Javelin 99.7% of the time, and it does so in about 8.5 turns. Average is 10 turns, so it's a little bit under average. It's doing pretty well. But this is where it gets cool. The damage per hit is 9. All right, and again, that's the ERPPC hitting for 15. That's 2 heavy medium lasers. They're smacking people for 10 points of damage a piece. So just those 3 things alone are able to dish out a significant amount of damage. The medium lasers able to, if you get a headshot, they're able to melt through even the heaviest armored heads and get an internal strike. We talked about the ERPPC and its decapitation ability. So very, very cool. 13.9% of the time on a little Javelin, this thing was seeing head kills, which is a lot. So it is very dangerous and very capable of decapitation. The other thing that jumps out at me here is it's still doing decent criticals, 3.06. That's an average number. That's pretty good. What I would say about that is because it has so many guns to bear, right? You do have that opportunity to generate some more criticals, which is pretty cool. But this is the kind of mech, when we talk about things like the Kintaro or, other things that have a bunch of SRMs and crit finding weapons. And I'm like, hey, you got to pair it with something that can bore holes in things. This is that mech. This is that mech that isn't like a 100-ton Devastator or something along those lines. This is a really nice, affordable mech that you can do big chunks of damage with and open up those holes for mechs to really spray in those crit finders. So very, very cool. Excited about the offensive benchmarks to start off. But let's take a look at the defense. Let's see how that Pharaoh Lamb performs. All right, so let's dig into the armor diagnostic first. So the first thing I see is a little bit too much armor on the rear and maybe not enough on the legs. I would just do a little bit of redistribution there. But otherwise, pretty good even distribution across the board. Now, what we see here on the mobility analysis, pretty good. 1.7% of the time, this thing is taking a motive hit. Those critical slots in the legs, those typical roll again slots, are populated with jump jets. So if you get through the exterior leg armor, you will, and you do generate a critical, you will cripple this mech's ability to move in some form or another. Either you're going to reduce its ground movement or you're going to reduce its jump movement. So if you do get through on the legs, again, it's gonna suffer a little bit. And also the other downside of jump jets in the legs, as many of you know, is if you're in depth 1 water, you can't jump out. All of the jump jets on this mech are in the legs. So, I guess don't go in the water. You don't really need to because, again, this thing, unless you're looking for partial cover, this thing stays so cool. I mean, just use other things for partial cover. So anyway, let's talk about survivability. Mobility is fine. It generally holds on. At average target mod is 1.98 throughout 10,000 simulations, so I'm not really concerned there. Survivability, though, 91.5%. Let's talk about that number. So I look at the armor diagnostic on the left. I look at the survivability on the right. It's got to be the Pharaoh Lamb. It just has to be. It's doing a really, really solid job of keeping this mech up with only 12 tons of armor, because 91.5% as a point of reference is the same as something like a Timberwolf Prime, which, is a very well armored, much faster mech, right? It can claim a higher target mod. All of those things play into this simulation. So seeing that survivability is very, very good. Now, standard engine, fantastic. You're only seeing engine deaths 1% of the time because, again, there's nothing in the side torso. Ammo deaths, never happening because it is cased, so it's fully protected. If that ammo detonates in that side torso, you got case there to cover that up, and it is clan case, by the way. As I mentioned, it is a clan tech base, so that's how that rolls. And then 7.5% of those total deaths are CT or head. So most of the time, it has to get cored all the way through. And if we look at the bar chart in the center there, you can see those first 7, 8, even 9 turns, it's holding on really, really well. It doesn't start to exponentially ramp up until turn 9 and beyond. So this thing does a very good job of staying in the fight to deliver that damage, which, as we saw previously, is pretty solid. So let's put it all together. Let's take a look at the efficiency and see what Battlytics thinks of the Merlin C. All right, so first and foremost, survey says 8.07. That's a very, very good number. Now, I did update the line chart in the bottom left there, that efficiency rating chart. That purple line, in case anybody was wondering or you're new to the channel, that's the average distribution of all the mechs I've ever reviewed in the last 4 years that we've been doing this. So you can see like the bulk of the area under the curve, right, is in that sort of like 4.5 to maybe 6.5 range, and then it starts to taper off, right? It's interesting, like 6, 7, 8 is where it starts to, dip down, which means there's less mechs that fall into that range. So, for example, like if you looked at the mechs that top the scale at 10, they're more common than the mechs that are at 1 or 2. That's probably a byproduct of the mechs that I have selected to review. I typically don't review total like dumpster fire mechs, like the things that only have tag on them and no guns. So it's sort of a little bit of an outlier. I would compare anything between 3 and 10 as meaningful. So if you look at where this mech sits on that curve, it's very, very good. It's desirable. It's one you want to take. It's going to get you a little bit of bang for your buck, most certainly. Now let's just gravitate back up to the top and let's talk about the effectiveness of this mech. So the survivability we just talked about, 91.5%. And we talked about sort of the curve and how that really kind of ramps up only in those later turns, significantly. And you can see the separation between the purple area and the blue area. What that is that's the optimized ACD, which has that 219 points, and that's by turn. And then the purple is the effective, which factors in your survivability, because if you're dead, you can't do as much damage. So the separation represents the damage loss, and the loss is only 3.6%. So very, very, very good number. Anything under 10% is great, in my opinion. 3.6 is very, very solid. In the middle section, we'll talk about gunnery sensitivity. So is it worth putting, a really strong gunnery 0 pilot in this, or will you get away with a gunnery 4 guy? So what this says basically is, yes, it's more sensitive than average to changes in gunnery. And basically, you can see here, like, it's a pretty flat curve. So every sort of incremental improvement in gunnery will, like from 3 to 4, or I'm sorry, 4 to 3, 3 to 2, so on and so forth. It gets you about 0.9 or so of an improvement. That curve that you see is pretty standard for every mech. Again, for those of you that are new, like where kind of 2 is sort of the optimal number, and then it kind of sort of flattens out. It gets weird when there's a lot of pulse lasers, targeting computers, other things involved. Sometimes going with a lower gunnery score pilot is actually better for your return on investment. So in this case, though, 2 is probably optimal. I would say 3. I would not put a gunnery 4 pilot in this. Again, you want that ERPPC hitting early and often. Those heavy mediums, they have very crappy range, right? They're like a standard medium, 369. You're going to be firing them a lot at long range, so you're going to want to get return on that as soon as you can. That's 10 points of damage. So I would go with like a gunnery 2 pilot. If it were me, that battle value would calculate out to 2618, and then your effective ACD, which you would expect on average, again, in a simulation over a 12-turn game, it's about 211 or so points of damage over that 12 turns. So not too bad. So again, overall, I love the efficiency on this mech. I talked about it earlier. Love the versatility, the distribution. Really not even thinking about the flamer and the machine gun in terms of like eliminating those threats like infantry or fast hovercraft or other annoying things that you just want to cook. So I think I like the defensive capabilities that this thing has built into it. But meanwhile, it's not sacrificing any damage because it's got those big guns. Let's talk about a little bit more how I would use this on the tabletop, what roles I think it would play very well. We'll look at the threat and so on and so forth. Here it comes. All right, so 3 roles that I would go with, and that's just me. 2 are pretty obvious, Brawler and Vanguard. The closer you get, the better. There's no minimum range. There's nothing. Just get as close as you possibly can. You can fire literally everything and run and build up no heat. So why not? Second one is Vanguard. This thing has tremendous survivability. If it is the big guy in a medium lance, for example, right? You're the 60-tonner and you've got, Phoenix Hawk, a Trebuchet, and like a, I don't know, Valkyrie or something, right? This thing can soak up all the fire. And if your opponent is a fool and decides not to shoot the Merlin, you're dishing out a crap load of damage. Remember, you can do 20 points of damage in an Alpha Strike all the way out to the maximum range of the LRMs, right? That's when that thing starts hitting 21 inches, right? 21 hexes. You can start doing an Alpha Strike of 20. At 9 hexes or 9 inches, that Alpha Strike doubles to 40. It's a 40-point Alpha Strike in chunks of 10, 10, 15, and 5. That's devastating. They have to focus fire this thing down, and it will last a pretty long time, I think, if it does. The other role that I picked for this thing, which is a little weird, but I'll tell you where my head's at, is a skirmisher role. So if the Merlin isn't the big dog on the field, let's say it's the little dog, it's the little Chihuahua, and it's hanging out with king crabs and banshees and devastators and things along those lines, right? I think this mech can play a really, really super annoying hit and run game. So again, that clan ERPPC hits very, very far. The LRMs come into range 21 inches. You're dealing 20 points of damage. That is not insignificant. It's enough to force a piloting check, a PSR on any mech. If you can work it into 9 inches and people are too busy focused on the assault mechs, you're smacking people for 40 points of damage. Again, that's a lot of damage, and it's big chunks of damage. If I think back to like one of my favorite 3025 era Banshees, speaking of which, it's got the AC-10 and the twin PPCs. That's 30 points of damage, 3 groups of 10. Like, that's a lot of damage. And again, like, I'm sort of gushing over this thing, but I really like those heavy medium lasers. I mean, they're nasty. So that's how I would use this thing in a skirmisher role. That's how I would use it if it's, in that Vanguard or sort of the main sort of command mech role. That's what I would do. But leave it in the comments. Tell me if you've ever used this mech. Tell me what you think of this mech. Tell me if you even knew this one existed. I like looking for ones that aren't common. I'm not sure if everybody is aware of this one or not. I think it's relatively new. But again, I can't remember if this one was in the rec guides or not. I don't remember. I just have like books everywhere and I like page through them. I look through Mega Mech. I don't know where the hell I found it. But anyway, leave it in the comments what you think about the Merlin C. Now, that said, a couple of closing thoughts here. Number one, Aries Games and Minis. If you want to go treat yourself to something wonderful, a little post-holiday pick-me-up, or you have some cash from the holidays that you're looking to burn, what better way to burn it than on BattleTech stuff for you? So Aries Games and Minis got everything. The books, the dice, the miniatures. They've got supporting vendor stuff like Fighting Piranha, the decals, right? The graphics. They've got Hardware Studios, terrain. They've got all sorts of great stuff out there. So definitely check out Aries Games and Minis. Also, if you want to spend some money, Terrainify. I love Terrainify. Check out our friends over there. They've got just absolutely phenomenal stuff. Just great stuff coming out all the time as well. So definitely check out Terrainify. Keep an eye on all of the good things coming out there. And then lastly, don't forget about us. Subscribe, like, leave a comment, as I said. Subscribe and like again. All it is to click a button. It's free. It costs nothing. But if you want to spend some of that holiday money on DFA, you can head on over to Patreon. It's a little bit of money, just $1 a month. That's it. Just $1 a month is the minimum buy-in. Then we have $5 and $10 tiers as well. Each tier gives you access to different things, special features in our apps, access to voting and all sorts of cool stuff. So if you want to get involved, more involved in the channel, you can certainly do so over there. But that's it. That's all I got. Guys, again, tell me what you think about the Merlin. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you're excited about all the new minis coming out. I know I am. I can't wait. But that said, I got nothing else. So do me a favor, stay tuned, because there's always great stuff coming from Death from Above Wargaming. Have a great night.